good plans designed for safety within the school buildings, have our teachers trained, have our administrators trained. In Shawnee Mission, we have our own officers, some don't, but work in conjunction with our local entities so that we have a plan that's in place and we know what everybody's going to do at any given moment.
Thank you, Sandy. I noticed I didn't see your name back there. Did you get knocked out in the last election?
Well, of course.
Okay. Well, I know her and her husband Jim have done a lot for Shawnee, and I really respect them. But about this issue, I want to buy a hunting rifle in Kansas, but I don't want to buy a hunting rifle in Kansas until I know that gun purchase funds school safety. That's how I feel about it. Now, if we're talking about arming teachers, well, then we need a way that every gun purchase funds school safety, so that when those teachers go to buy their gun, they're funding school safety, and they know that, and that's a statewide initiative. I want all of our initiatives, our legislative agenda, to attract healthy taxpayers to Kansas, and I think this can do that.
No, I've been a teacher for 39 years, and I can't believe that we're having shooter drills in our school. And I teach in a private Christian school, but the reality is here. This is a present in our society. And I could throw a question out to the audience. How many of you have ever experienced a teacher that shouldn't have been a teacher, or seen a teacher who shouldn't? And that's the reason I was just talking to Kathy about this last night, that I don't believe, she doesn't believe in putting a gun in the hand of every teacher. I believe, but there is a necessity that our schools need to be a safe place. Putting them in contact with people who can walk the school and train the teachers in what do you do in this instance, and then have drills and have the kids be prepared. There's a lot that you can do to mitigate the circumstances without spending a lot of money. But then the reality is we need to look at spending certain monies to make sure that there's a qualified response person to protect our kids at the schools, because safety is number one. And there are areas where this becomes more important than other areas. So we don't agree with, well, I'm not in favor, she's not in favor of putting a gun in the hand of every teacher. I don't think that's the answer. But the reality is that somebody in the district, somebody on the site needs to know how to respond and have the access and the tools to deal with an intruder situation. It's just the reality of where we live and where we're and the day in which we live.
This next question will start with Steve Gordon. Sorry, I should have.
That's okay.
I should be quicker. Get your exercise in. Kansas Department for Children and Families has been making headlines for the past several years for problems within the agency. What are some of these problems as you see them, and what changes should be made to the foster care system?
Oh boy. Number one, I'm not familiar at this time with that issue. I have had some experience with the foster care system. Where do I start? I believe that, I know that Kathy believes the same way, that there are things that we need to do to improve the reliability of the reporting of the foster care system. We know when a kid gets in the foster care system, sometimes they disappear or they get bounced, and I'm not faulting anything, it's just a reality of the system. They get bounced from family to family to family, and then when they get through the foster care system, they just turn them loose and they're on their own. And we lose a lot of people between their foster care families and adulthood, productive adulthood, because they don't have a transition process. So I think one of the things that we can do is improve the transition process from the foster care system. Number two, we can improve the process. We can improve the foster care system to where it's not just there are some who use the foster care system to generate income for themselves, and more children so that you can have more money is a horrible, horrible funding solution, if you will. And I think that, so there are things that we can do to look at the system to minimize that and take care of people between the foster care system and what we hope is a productive adulthood.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. My comments about that, what can we do? Well, I know what I want in Kansas is a healthy family. When that doesn't happen for children, they're not born into a healthy family, well, public education becomes very significant for them. And public education can give them something to grow with and something that can give them accountability and recognition. And there's more we can do there. I'm more focused on attracting healthy taxpayers to Kansas, but certainly I think public education plays an important role for foster children.
DCF always said they were doing a wonderful job under our former governor. And in fact, the sun was not shining. It was underfunded. To begin with, we don't have enough foster parents. We don't have enough social workers. We don't have enough counselors in our schools to work with these children. I attended a session as if I were a foster child. They are gathered, they have 15 minutes to gather what they want to take. They are at a minimum in a foster care home for a year, but more than likely it's 24 months. It is up to 6 months to 8 months before they even know where their parents are, or can they maybe even meet with them. It depends on the need of the child, what the issue is. Having them sleep in DCF offices is not appropriate. That's not where they need. But we don't have enough trained foster care homes. As far as children being harmed, as far as children dying, those records oftentimes were torn up. The notes on those were torn up. There was no transparency to tell what truly had happened. And the reason was those social workers were told to tear them up so there wouldn't be anything to follow. That this year we have looked at, from the DCF office, they are not allowed to do that anymore. We are looking at what more as far as transparency can be done, and there is a lot. There's a lot of work to do. The Oversight Committee on the DCF is now meeting regularly, and instead of saying there isn't a problem, they recognize there is a problem, and the head of DCF is working with them to try to straighten some of those out. I think at the last minute, this last session, we put in another $16 million for them because of that situation.
The next question will start with Andrew Perla. If you wanted advice on proposed legislation regarding education or school finance, who would you ask and why?
I would like to start with Dr. Mathers with KCK. The Blue Light School District does a great job as well. They have an accounting team that's superb. But the people who have the hands-on experience who are managing these budgets, we've advanced these budgets over the last 100 years, the same as the taxes, and we're getting better. We are. And that failure is, it's easy to recognize, but there are some successes, and we are getting better at financing. But that's who I would turn to, certainly.
Cindy, we'll go Cindy first, yeah.
Go for it.
Without a doubt, Dale Dennis. He has more history with school finance, curriculum, and what goes on day to day in every district. You can ask him a question and get an answer back in 5 to 10 minutes. A full run of what a school district, what it's going to cost a school district, or what they need to spend, or what they have available. He is the backbone, and it's all up here. And I hope someday they train someone in his position that can sponge up or absorb as much as that man knows today.
Well, I don't have a list of names for you because I'm blanking all of those names. It's part of being 61 years old. I apologize. But one of the things I've done as an educator for the last 39 years is drawn my circle of, I call it my stupid question circle, because I always get advice. The Bible says that plans fail for lack of counsel. And so I rarely move forward without counsel. Kathy has me to ask, who would you go to? I have a number of retired superintendents that I would call to begin with. One of them, Tom Trigg, is the name that comes to mind. And I don't remember where he worked last, but he's a brilliant man, successful administrator, and it's that kind of superintendent I would ask because they've been in the trenches and know the real issues.
This will be the final question of this part, so if you are thinking of a question or want to write one down, go ahead and slip those in as they answer this final question for this half of the form. This will begin with Cindy Neighbor. Please describe what you believe to be the largest challenge facing Johnson County in the next 5 years.
Being able to work with the state, the county, and the cities on revenue, taxes, stability, that sort of thing. Because the state over the past 7 or 8 years has not shared the funds that it was obligated to do to cities and counties. A lot of the local control has been taken away from cities and counties. We need to make sure that our cities and counties have the ability to serve our local communities. That means in our schools, in our towns, providing services for our elderly, providing services for all citizens in our city as far as simple things like ice removal and road repair and all of those things that count and make us good Kansas citizens, but also allows us to keep our standard of living wherever we are and to keep us safe.
I'll go next. So Johnson County attracts Western Kansas pretty well. It has for a while. I think this problem at the state level is for us to attract healthy taxpayers statewide. Johnson County, the population is going to go up by 40,000 over the next 5 years. If we're talking about 5 years, we're going to gain 40,000 residents over the next 5 years, certainly. Now, what I'm worried about is the 2020 census data and what that's going to tell us about Kansas and what we've done this decade to drive out healthy taxpayers. If we find out that that is in fact true, we do need to generate a positive response to attract healthy taxpayers to Kansas of all ages.
And my answer dovetails with both of those. I think our biggest challenge, and as it has been for the last 30 years, is growth and the things that are produced by growth and a need for us to see fair taxation and supplies. But, you know, my favorite drum is there is an increasing need in Johnson County to take care of the poor because of the underserved, those who are the working poor. And so as Johnson County grows, as we see the population grows, we're going to need to be aware that there is a presence in our county. Sometimes you hear a news story from a neighborhood and you can't believe that's happening in that part of town. Well, that's part of that growth of the underserved. Those problems are coming to Johnson County. And if we're ahead of them and can provide for the people and the needs and take care of innocent people that are the product of that, then we don't experience some of the problems that happen in the urban core because of social situations that we have. So I believe our biggest challenge is going to be growth and how to best handle that and stay ahead of the need.
We'll move to some of the questions that you want to ask these candidates. We have a stack of questions, all of them pretty different, so we'll start to make our way through these. If at any time you have another question that pops up, go ahead and write it down, hand it to Catherine, and we can ask that as well. Where were we at? Who do we start with? You had it first, so we'll start with Steve Gordon this time around. Some of you have mentioned increased funding for education, foster care, etc. If you believe there needs to be more funding for various programs, how would you recommend gathering the funds to support those programs?
Well, funds come from revenue, and we have to measure our revenue accurately. We have to have a method to measure the revenue when it comes in. And Kansas is working on, and should have worked on it a long time ago, but I think we're doing a better job of working on measuring the revenue, predicting the revenue. And one of the things that my wife, I think, will be good at, because she's participated in some of this process, is with regards to there is a need for, or a movement on, to increase Medicaid. And I apologize if I get it wrong, because I'm not a medical person, so I interchange Medicaid with Medicare, and I know one's federal and one's state. But one of the things that we need to look at is medical legislation, and we need people to advise the legislators on medical legislation so that we make legislation and use our funds wisely. I know within my wife's industry that she owns and operates a birth center, and that costs half to deliver a baby what it does in a hospital, which saves insurance companies thousands of dollars, can save millions of dollars. So one of the things that we can do is look within the industry and what we're doing to spend smarter, which will create revenue within the revenues that we already have. We need to spend smarter. And then we need to look also at ways to increase revenue, which is bringing taxpayers into the state, so creating jobs too.
Thank you, Kyle. You do such a good job on the radio. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Also,
Flattery will get you nowhere.
I have a playbook on my laptop for generating revenues at the state level, and I want to open up the playbook. There's plays we can use as a state to generate revenue. There's a lot more we can do, and it takes teamwork to do that, but certainly I would like to open up every possible revenue stream for the state of Kansas eventually.
There are a couple of new options that are coming our way. One is online sales, like from Amazon and those institutions, and that was ruled to be legal by the courts. And I know Kansas will be looking at that next year. One of the things that might do also is give a little bit more even play field to the mom and pop shops or the small businesses that have had to compete with the online no sales tax business. Another one, I know that people have looked at putting more tax on cigarettes. Now, whether that would come to happen or not is one way of doing it, but it's more of a health issue than it is a tax issue. It would be beneficial, but the hope would be to cut cigarette smoking even more than it is today, which would lower the healthcare costs for smokers. Another thing was from the federal tax plan that was written, we will get reimbursed some federal tax money. Many have thought, well, let's return that to our constituents. Well, what's a better thing to do? Possibly take tax off of food. Reduce the food tax. We are the second highest in the nation in food tax. So what we bring in and what we spend, we have to look at seriously and what long-term effects it's going to have, the stability it's going to have, and what kind of impact we'll have from that. But those are a couple of ideas that may come, and there's also another new piece to gaming that was approved, and that's a possibility for about 1.5 million in increase. So that's what we're looking at right now.
The next audience question will start with Andrew Perla. Rates of suicide and addiction have been on the rise. What policies would you propose to address these challenges in our communities?
Thank you so much, Kyle. I was very concerned about the 2 suicides at Shawnee Mission Northwest High School last school year, and I don't know if there's age-specific responses we need, but if I'm considering boys, 10th graders, what do they need? I think they need to start planning their lives, and they need to have that opportunity in school to do. And I think that could help. But now if we're talking people in their middle years, I don't have a good comment for you, but I definitely think we can help boys when they can draw their education plan for 5 to 10 years in the 10th grade. I definitely think that's a step in the right direction.
The largest reason for the increase in suicide is the lack of funding for mental health. We have cut mental health over and over and over again, and we know now that we cannot do that. Mental health affects someone in our family, a neighbor, a friend, And everybody knows somebody that has a mental health issue. And without having the counselors or the money available and the facilities available, it's going to take a long time. One of the things, Shawnee Mission actually had 4 suicides last year, unfortunately, and they're becoming more prevalent around the world. I mean, just in the United States and around the world. Some of that is brought on by homelessness, some of it is brought on by mental illness, some of it's been brought on by family situations. Maybe a dad's gone in the military and the mom's home, or the child's going to school and working, and it's hard on mom, and there are other siblings. It can be health issues. There's a variety of things. But a lot of it, kids today feel that there's a lot more stress on them than there was during our time. And I hate to tell you, I'm older than you. So,
I'm not going to ask you to prove it.
I have a driver's license. But the issue is we have to get back to providing the mental illness support, or the counselors available to provide the services, and not for just 2 or 3 days, which insurance approves. It's got to be a planned out program so that we know that patients are staying on their medication, that there is a follow through, that people are calling them, and they're safe. This is a critical issue in the state of Kansas right now.
And I know if you ask a woman her age that she's got to kill you next, because if you find out what it is, it's just supposed to be illegal. But I know one of Kathy's answers to this is third-party insurance with regards to funding for this, because I agree that the family situation, the social setting that we are, single-parent homes, dad's away or mom's away in the military, there's so many things now that are hitting our kids that are sources of confusion and stress and depression, and as many things, societal ills, the responsibility falls on the schools to help solve them, because that's where the kids come every day. So I think one of the options for increasing funding is to tell or is to mandate insurance companies to increase it from 2 to 3 days to a period of time that's more reasonable, that reduces the responsibility, it takes the responsibility off the state and puts it on society, and maybe spreads the cost rather than just sticking this one on the government. So I know Kathy's answer to that is third-party insurance.
This next question will start with Cindy Neighbor. The Shawnee Mission School District is economically and racially more diverse than it ever has been. What are your thoughts on wraparound services and how they affect schools and students?
Shawnee Mission is going through a growth spurt of just that nature, and it may not be higher enrollment, but it is certainly the diversity issue. And we're seeing more and more of it on a daily, weekly, and yearly basis. Wraparound services are a necessity. We have, in Shawnee Mission, we have 82 languages that we serve. We need to make sure that newsletters and information that are going to these families that are not English speaking as a first language, that we reach them with communication that they understand, that they can work with their kids in school, and that they know that there are facilities available, who to ask, who to go to, being able to send them out to receive services, whether mental health, social work, medical service, any of those kinds of services. And I know that there has been an attempt to bring some of that in, to provide that line of open door communication so that people have that opportunity. But that is critical when we have a diversity of that size and that need.
And I would agree that wraparound services are needed in the school. It also allows the teachers to do their job. It's impossible to do your job when you have 4 different languages sitting in a classroom, and you have have just this a specific block of time to educate students. And with the things the issues that we've already discussed, the needs in the classroom aren't growing, they're not getting smaller. And so the need to provide somebody to come alongside the teachers so that the kids can learn is a necessity. Wraparound services, office staff, people to help with language, which is it's increasing statewide. So it's a necessity that we're going to have to deal with. Of course, finding the revenue for that is another project, because we've already seen that spending money we don't have doesn't work. So we have to find ways to increase the revenue to pay for these wraparound services.
Ms. Neighbor, Mr. Gordon, thank you. I have no comment. I agree with the other candidates. Thank you very much.
Next question, we'll start with Steve Gordon.
Before you ask a question,
Yep.
may I make one comment? It has nothing to do with what they've done here. There was a question about services, extending services for mental health. What you need to understand is that no mandate may be placed on an insurance company in the state of Kansas until it goes through a year-long study on the Kansas employees insurance, serving on insurance. They have to know what the cost is almost down to the cent before it can be mandated. So that is almost a 2 to 3 year project. So just that's for information for the people here that are looking for that.
Steve Gordon, the next question. I believe, this is the audience member speaking, I believe we need more accountability in our representatives. I believe the best way to achieve this is transparency in government. What will you do to get better transparency in Kansas government?
Well, there was an article in the Kansas City Star about recording every vote, and making everybody accountable. I agree with transparency in government, with a few exceptions. We all know that there are legislators that are good politicians, and where there are good politicians, there are politicians with motives that aren't always above board. And so I can agree with, and Kathy can agree with the most transparency. The best way to deal with it is to have everybody above the table and count every vote. I know that one of the problems with that is the enormous amount of time that you would spend recording every vote. The other exception that we would have is that if we're voting for Speaker of the House or the Minority Leader, I believe that should be a private vote, because it takes away the ability of whoever's elected from taking, I'm looking for the word, revenge upon the people who didn't vote for them. And so there are a couple of instances where I would require the vote to be private, but other than that, I'm all for transparency in government.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. That was great. I agree. And Mr. Jenkins isn't here. I hope he shoots some fireworks, because I kind of want to. But I know he probably had a lot to say about that as well. I'll tell you what, I went to the Johnson County Treasurer's Office to get some more transparency, and I have tax information on my phone saved in my Google Drive about the county. And so that's something that people can do. But if you find something in your own look at a tax formula or the tax revenues and how they're assigned in Johnson County, then you should take a look and then contact your representative. That's how I feel about the issue of transparency. When it comes to getting to the legislature and making those decisions and those votes, I agree with Mr. Gordon.
This was a major issue in the legislature this past year, and it should be, and you all should demand more. One of the things that we got passed through for transparency was the records for those kids in DCF that have been killed or hurt seriously. Those records can now be open to the public on what issues and why it took so long, or how many visits they had, or what was really happening. But beyond that, on our side of the aisle, we introduced between 9 and 15 transparency bills this year. And about 3 of them made their way through both the House and the Senate. We tried and will continue to look at transparency because we work for you. You don't work for us. And we need to let you know what we do, how we vote, and what we're proposing. Because if it's not good in your eyes, we need to know. And we need to be able to sit down and explain why or why not. And that's going to take more pressure on leadership in the House and the Senate. And that comes down to they allow what they want to be heard, and the committee chairmen allow what they want to be heard. If they don't want it, or the governor doesn't want it, it doesn't go anywhere. So it takes 63 in the House, 21 in the Senate to pass those laws, and we have to be diligent in letting people know that we still need more transparency. We need to know what's going on, and that again, we work for you, you don't work for us.
The next question will start with Andrew Hurla. How would you work in a bipartisan way as a legislator? Please give examples.
Well, first of all, I think Mr. Hensley in Topeka is a hero. He's one of only 8 Democratic senators in the state of Kansas. So we have to be bipartisan. For the Senate, it's 32 to 8. So that's out of balance, I want to say. Off balance. And, oh, mic's out. So I would defer to Mr. Hensley to work in the Senate, and for the House, I think that the Democrats are coming up with good ideas, and if they're, if there's Republicans who aren't willing to accept that a good idea is a good idea, then there's nothing I can do.
This is a great question because last year, what we did was build a ladies' caucus, and it was by consensus. They were representatives from both sides of the aisle, and guess what tax plan came out? The one that passed. And we had made an effort, and we had gone to the speaker, and we have men in that caucus too, so I can't take all the, accolades for the ladies. But what we did was we went to the Speaker of the House and said, we have a plan, and he goes, I don't want to hear it right now. Within 3 hours, he was calling us back to his office because that's the plan that got the votes. So what that exhibits is compromise. It says talking across the aisle. We didn't all agree on absolutely everything. So you give a little here, you give a little there, you take a little here. But what you do is you come up with good law. And you come up with something that is agreeable to the people when we look at it as a whole. And it went on to pass the Senate. So you can't go up there with an agenda and think that your way is the only way. It's about building relationships.